It's the third time the charm. We dive into Nick Caserio's press conference following the jettison of Lovie Smith.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yeah, I saw the news when it broke last night. Obviously, it's tough when something happens that way, but I still have a ton of respect for Lovie as a coach, as a person. He did a lot of good things around here this past year, this past season, so grateful for him. Kind of excited to see where he's going to end up next, because I know he's going to do good things. Obviously, the NFL and every team, it's a results-driven business. We didn't get the results we wanted over the course of the season, but we still think our best football as a franchise is in front of us. I'm excited to see what Nick has in store for this offseason, and we know he's going to make good decisions, bringing in the right people. And like I said, we're excited to continue building a really good franchise around here, so we're looking forward to it.
Welcome, everybody, to a Tuesday episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Texans is presented by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. Welcome in, everybody. I'm John Hickman, joined by none other than Cody Davis, and there's no way around it. Lovie Smith is out, and Nick Caserio had to answer for the firing of his second one-and-done head coach under his tenure, head coach Lovie Smith. And that is what this show will be about, discussing the tone of Nick Caserio during their press conference on Tuesday evening, takeaways, and really just looking at the future, as the future is now the present. Cody, you had an opportunity to be present during that press conference, and everything that I read on the timeline, as I was at a basketball game for my little brother, but everything I read on the timeline was Nick Caserio did not look like or sound like or come off as the same Nick Caserio that we've seen in the previous 2 seasons. What was his tone like? What was the atmosphere in that press conference on Tuesday evening?
Caserio's tone and demeanor was completely different. Ever since he became the general manager of the Houston Texans, it seemed like he always brought a sense of comfort to himself. Comfort, positivity, confidence. But on yesterday, everything seemed different. And what I believe is, and I'm going to dive more into this once I get more information. I know a lot of us here believe that there is a sense that Nick Caserio is going to at least finish out his contract. He signed a 6-year contract. We're going into year 3, and everybody knows everything that has went on since he became general manager. However, John, listeners and viewers, to me at least, it seems like he had a very intense meeting with ownership, and it seems like they are giving him one last chance to get it together. Before moving on, I want you guys just to take a look and listen to how different Nick Caserio looked in his press conference, and think back to other clips from past press conferences that you've seen.
I would say this day, it's been a hard day. It's been a rough day, but I would say it's been a very thoughtful and productive day. I've had the opportunity to meet with essentially all of our coaches here in the building that are on staff for their feedback, for their perspective on where they see things. Had an opportunity to meet with the team and with the players and address them and be honest and very candid about where we are. And my message to them was about accountability, and that I take responsibility where we are, and that I'm committed to them and doing everything I can. This is a players' league. This is about the players. So you're only as good as the players that you have in your building, and it's a people business. You're only as good as the people that you have in your building. So our commitment is to find the best people, to utilize the resources that we have, to try to continue to move this program along in a positive direction. Say we've made some strides and some progress. We've put ourselves in a decent position. I think that's the best way to summarize it. I think it's important, and nobody wants to hear words. It's about action, and nobody's going to be happy until we have results behind that action. So that's the most important thing.
You guys heard the word accountability, responsibility, and there's another word that he kept floating around throughout his entire press conference, and that's disappointment. For the first time, I saw a general manager in Nick Caserio actually owning up to his mistakes. Now, we can say everything that we want about the situation that he walked into, but this was the first time that Nick Caserio fell on the sword. And it seems like, at least this is what it seemed like, that he finally realized his mistakes. Not only that, John, listeners and viewers, another thing that I took away from this is going to be the very first time where Nick Caserio is going to work as a unit with several people within this organization for this next head coaching hire. Because for the very first time in a Nick Caserio press conference, I did not hear the word unless I was hearing him talk about the mistakes that he made as to roster construction, as to the hiring of Lovie Smith, and even David Culley to a certain extent. This is the first time that he said we. When Cal McNair spoke prior to Nick Caserio taking the mic, they said we, and that is very important.
Yeah, man, I want to go to the past before I discuss the present. Last year, when Lovie Smith was hired, these were some of my takeaways from Nick Caserio's press conference from last year. My job was to take a lot of information in that hiring process and try to put ourselves in a position to make a decision I feel is ultimately best for the Houston Texans organization. And I believe we arrived at that point. He continued with, as I worked through this and got to the end point, realized the best decision and best opportunity for this organization to move forward was with the choice of Lovie Smith as the next head coach. I wanted to open with that because I wanted to put aside the rumors, put to bed the rumors of this wasn't Nick's choice. Regardless of how everything played out in that process last year, Nick Caserio decided to go with Lovie Smith. That is a direct result as what we saw on Tuesday. You are 100% right, Cody. He said things like, this is a players' league. This is a people's league. You're only as good as the players and the people in the building. You know what that sounds like to me? I'm only going to get as far as the people that I bring in and work with on a day-to-day basis. Another thing that caught my eye while listening to the press conference on Tuesday, nobody wants to hear words. It's about action, and nobody is going to be happy without action. Nick Caserio has been widely known to say a bunch of words in his 2-year tenure, but there ain't been a lot of action behind it, right? And another thing, which I think speaks directly to the relationship, the deteriorated relationship between Nick Caserio and former head coach Lovie Smith, utilizing more resources and people we have in the building, utilizing more data and information that's available. To me, that speaks to two things. Number one, as we continue to find out more and more of the situation that was going on behind the scenes, players did not really rock with Lovie Smith as a whole towards the end of the year. Players were trying to give him their ideas in order to improve not only the relationship with the players that don't have nothing to do on Sundays, but the outcome on Sundays. And that didn't happen. So I think that he realizes and understands that in order to move forward, the next guy I bring in, everybody got to be on one accord. Everybody. And that's kind of odd because when I go back to last year, if you guys remember, there was a point in time where Nick Caserio mentioned how he and Lovie Smith didn't see eye to eye basically on a few philosophies, but yet you still went and decided to hire him as your head coach. So it was really ruined from the beginning. But there's a second part about that I like, utilizing more data and information that's available. To me, that speaks to directly Nick Caserio and him basically saying, I have to take into account of what everybody else is saying, because everybody else that is around me at this point, no Jack Easterby, no outside distractions, really does have the best interest for this franchise in mind. And now we all got to work together. So whatever your information that you have and the data you're working on with in order to improve this team, let's all collectively come together and make this thing work. Now, we'll say this, Cody and listeners and viewers, I didn't like Cal McNair not being able to answer those questions with Nick Caserio on Tuesday. You signed off on a lot of these decisions because what did you do? As you've done in the last 3 seasons, you delegated huge decision makings and a lot of things that you should have been in on, you delegated that to somebody else, which is why we're sitting here in 3 years. Now we're going to have 3 coaches, Cal McNair. I didn't like that. The job security question should have been answered because he was asked about what if a coach came in and how would that coach feel now seeing 2 coaches gone in 2 years. I would have loved to hear Nick Caserio say this: I can't afford another one and done. I will stick by the coach me and Cal decides to hire. But on Tuesday, Cody, I got to be honest with you. Unless those guys are some hell of actors, to see that humility, to see Nick Caserio understand that his job is on the line, this is serious, these are his mistakes, I got to get it right. In order for me to do so, I have to collectively change my approach. I was impressed a little bit, just a little bit, because we have not seen that out of a guy that, if we're being honest, has made several mistakes since arriving to Houston.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to get at. And now, look, I'm really taking everything that I saw and witnessed on yesterday with a grain of salt at this point, because, John, how many times, since Nick Caserio came into the building, came on his podcast and said, oh my God, better days are ahead of us, and we're still stuck back at square one, if not even further. To go back to your point about Cal McNair not answering questions, I was a little bit disappointed because I wanted to hear what he had to say. However, I'm glad he didn't, because the fact that he didn't answer questions once again showcased the change of tone. And when I take a look at Cal McNair, this was the first time that he said "we." When he when
he's going to be heavily involved in his coaching search. I did like that.
And when we start first covering this team, it was always, when every time he spoke, it was always Bill O'Brien and Jack and Nick Caserio, Caserio, David Culley, Nick Caserio and Lovie Smith. All of that is out the window. He's saying me and Nick or we. That's it. Where
was Hannah McNair in this process on Tuesday? Where was she? Was she in the building? Was she?
Oh yeah, she was in the building. She was sitting front row. And once again, you're talking about a change of tone. Ever since I've been around this team, when we had big press conferences like this, Cal McNair was always somewhere in the back, or she'll come at the end of the press conference. Not today, or not on yesterday. She was right there, front and center, sitting next to her husband. What I will say is this: if there is a change of dynamic that's going on, especially with Nick Caserio and his so-called whether he's safe or not in his job security, I guarantee you she had something to do with it, because even after the press conference, she was still heavily involved in almost everybody's conversation, so she could know what is going on with her organization as well.
When Cody and I come back, we will continue our discussion surrounding the Tuesday press conference held by Cal McNair and General Manager Nick Caserio. Today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, again, is presented by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players. If they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. The best thing about Prize Pick, in my opinion, is you're not competing against other people. You're competing against the projections. It's just you versus the projections out there. And also, listen, first-time users, if you haven't checked out Prize Picks just yet, you can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. And it's January, which means it's tax time, and that's probably one of the funnest, best and most important times of the year for a lot of working adults, especially those with kids. Hey, let me carry some of y'all kids. But listen, to make it easy on yourself, come to TurboTax and don't worry about doing your own taxes. TurboTax has experts who can help relieve you from the stress of taxes and file for you so you don't have to worry about it at all. Visit TurboTax.com to learn more. Full service products only. Video meeting while expert does your taxes required. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers out there. Again, a lot of takeaways from Tuesday's press conference, and I think that this is something that we will continue to use at least for another day up until the hiring of a new head coach here in Houston. Cody, one thing that I wanted to look at was, again, I want to go back and forth. I'm jumping between timelines right now. When asked what was the process for you in between those things, and when did you consider Lovie Smith as a head coach possibility, Nick Caserio last year responded by stating, "My responsibility is to the McNair family to be as responsible and as resourceful as possible and ultimately make the right decision for the organization." And that's where we ended up with Lovie. Now, I want to jump to Tuesday. Nick Caserio mentioned that if he is not the guy for the general manager job, he's okay with that and he's not above anybody else. He said that if somebody feels that we're not going in the right direction, that people need to go, I respect that. That is nearly a year removed from one another. And my takeaway from that was I don't know how confident Nick Caserio is in his process, in the process that he, in his own foundation, that he presumably wanted to execute when he arrived in Houston 2 years ago. Back-to-back one-and-done coaches. And again, when your when your owner comes out and say, this time, I will be more heavily involved in the head coaching search, that to me comes off as your owner, Cal McNair, is not as confident as he was in you back when he had no clue about what he's doing. I think that we may see a different version of Cal, which is, I personally want to see it. But to go from what he said last year about hiring Lovie Smith to twice on 2 occasions on Monday night saying that I'm fine with if I'm not the right general manager and they need to move on from me. That speaks to his confidence in his own decision-making, which I think at this point is kind of hurting.
But John, let me ask you this question. Should he be confident in his decision? This is
Absolutely
a guy
not.
who has only won 7 games in the last 2 years. And once again, when you take a look at the tone of this press conference, I'm wondering if Nick thought to himself when he first took over as general manager of the Houston Texans, one, could he still keep the same Patriot way to build this franchise? And two, how much did he want it to be the guy to say, you know what, you deserve all the credit of rebuilding this organization and putting us on a mountaintop and all this other stuff. And I say that because, John, the first segment, we talked about how Nick Caserio has changed his tone of this coaching search, but he's also kind of changing his tone on the roster construction too. I had an opportunity to ask Nick Caserio on yesterday, since he mentioned a lot about accountability, disappointment, and mistakes, I asked him, what could he do better in terms of building a better team for the next head coach to be successful? And this is what he had to say.
Great question, by the way.
Yeah, every year we look at everything. So are there different ways, different players that could we bring on the team? Do we have an opportunity to add a player that maybe we lost out on? What were limiting factors? Why did a player work out? So those are dialogue and communications that we have with the scouting staff, and we meet on a regular basis. The coaching staff, the input of the coaching staff is going to be important. I think we've brought in, I'd say, some decent young players here over the past few years. It doesn't necessarily mean that we've solved all of our problems, but we've gotten good production out of a fair amount of players. We can all do a better job. When you win 3 games, it's not about one thing. It's not about one particular area that you have a shortcoming. There's a number of things, but I think there are examples, whether it's, in the building, whether it's on the team, whether it's on the field, that, we saw some encouraging things. It doesn't mean that we've gotten ultimately to where we want to be. And whatever we can do to fix it, whatever areas we can look to improve, that's the only thing we can do is try to come up with solutions and fix problems. I mean, that's the only thing we can do. There's no other way around.
The one thing I love and hate about Nick Caserio is the fact that you do have to go through a lot of word salad in order to find out what he's truly trying to say. John, the one thing that caught my eye was the fact that he said the impact of the coaching staff is going to be important. Let's rewind. So damn well David Culley didn't have an input on the players that Nick Caserio brought into this organization, right? And how many times on this show we actually talked about, and we just mentioned it, that Nick Caserio and Lovie Smith did not see eye to eye, which means
I'm glad you brought that up because I really want to mention that again. I'm going to go back to last year. I think all of this is putting into perspective why Nick Caserio is on the hot seat and why the tone of this entire press conference was so different. Because last year, when asked about what were you looking for in a candidate and having gone through other candidates outside the building, what is it that ultimately led you to someone who was ultimately in your building? Nick Caserio responded, ultimately, it's about the right candidate for you and your building. In that same response, Caserio says something that I found interesting now that the season has played out and Lovie Smith is gone. And that to me was, I would say, one of the things that was interesting, just overall in my perspective. Lovie and I didn't know each other last year going into the season. And I would say systematically, defensively, it was certainly an adjustment or something that was different relative to what I was used to being around in New England from a front structure, from a number of different things. And it's interesting. Lovie and I laugh about it now, but we had a lot of good discussion and a lot of good dialogue and conversation, and sometimes friendly disagreements about maybe how we should be playing certain things or who was doing it. Now, I want to go back to what was going on Monday night. Okay, he mentioned several times about the importance of working together. We got to that. But then he also mentioned the head coach and general manager relationship. That goes directly to, if you knew that you guys had huge different opinions on scheme, on your system, then why was he hired in the first place? So it was another waste of time that you could have used. And I go back to Cody's point that he's been talking about for the past 10 months. You should have kept who? David Culley. And so all of this that we saw yesterday, it baffles my mind that he had an opportunity to go through that press conference, because I still feel like he should have been out their door. Listen, it made no sense from jump to hire Lovie Smith if you wasn't on the same page with him from the first day. It's a mess. And you're right, Cody. Moving forward, yeah, we are the world. Everybody's going to have to be hand in hand and working together, because he's not going to get far by doing things his way. BetOnline is your number one source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From pro football to college bowl season to basketball and the World Cup, we've got it all over at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can even find those at BetOnline as well. Always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting information. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more, because BetOnline is where the game starts.
As you know, Nick and I spoke with Lovie last night and informed him that we would be moving in a different direction as an organization. These decisions are extremely difficult, and we appreciate everything Lovie has done for us over the last 2 years as a coach and a leader. We're always looking to up our game in every area and take our organization to the next level. I have full confidence in Nick. He has led our football operation through a difficult stretch and continues to prove he's an elite talent evaluator. We talk constantly and have a plan for this process that we will execute together over the next days and weeks. For this hire, I'll be taking on a more active role in the process. Excuse me. The league has done a great deal of work to establish an equitable and inclusive head coach hiring process, which we fully support. As we conduct formal interviews in this process, Nick and I will operate very transparently and keep the media and fans updated on our progress. We feel there's a strong list of potential head coach candidates, and we're excited to work with them. We're going to pick the best coach to take this team into our next future with significant draft capital, salary cap space, and talented young roster.
Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. That was your owner, Cal McNair, discussing what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks. Cody, you know what I thought was a quote of the day? Nick Caserio saying, "Let's be real. The clock is ticking. We live in a high-pressure environment. The expectations are high, and it's about performance."
Really quick, I'm glad that you pointed that, because last year when they fired David Culley, I asked Nick Caserio, does he feel pressure to get the next head coaching hire right? Because most general managers do not get the opportunity to hire a third head coach. You know what he told me? There's no pressure in a head coaching hire. And he went on talking about how there's people in the world who they don't know when their next meal is going to come. That's pressure. Change of tone. I just found that was, really funny. Like, now he's feeling pressure.
Yeah,
okay.
Because the pressure is here. That decision that you made led to why you are under pressure. Pressure bust pipes. We're going to see what's going to happen. The Texans' potential head coaching list as of right now, Detroit Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson. They have requested to interview D'Amico Ryans. Defensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles, Jonathan Gannon, and the Eagles OC, Shane Steichen, is all on that list as well. My immediate thought is I like Ben Johnson the most, and I'll tell you guys why on tomorrow's podcast.
I actually like the list that they have right now, but I'm saving judgment. That's all I gotta say. Yesterday was a different tone from ownership, especially from Nick Caserio, and right now all I can tell the listeners and viewers out there is just hold judgments and let's just see how this is gonna play out. John, we talked about this last week. I want to see a real head coaching hire. Don't go out there talking about something you about to hire Josh McCown and all this other foolishness. Don't go out there and interview Hines Ward just to meet the Rooney Rule or whatever the case may be. No, just go through a real head coaching hire, because this organization, this management, everybody involved cannot go through another season full of dysfunction and embarrassment, man.
Make sure you guys check us out throughout the week here on the Locked On Texan podcast. Oh, man, you know what? Make sure y'all follow us on Twitter, man. We got a lot of over 2,000 subscribers, and if you are on Twitter, make sure you give us a follow. We will be interesting. I know I will on Twitter throughout the week, just discussing my thoughts on this entire process and situation. Follow me on Twitter at John_Hickman12. Excuse me. Follow the Locked On Texan podcast on Twitter as well at Locked On Texans. And as always, if you are a new person, new family member to the show, subscribe, like, and comment.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, that's Cody, COTYDAVIS_24. Really quick, as you guys know, the Houston Texans are in the midst of changing their jersey. So on Thursday, be on the lookout. Thursday night, early Friday morning, be on the lookout, because we have been invited to a jersey, some type of jersey presentation. They're going to preview what they're thinking, what the new jerseys could potentially look like. So, I mean, in the midst of all this,
positive. At
least we know some positivity. There's going to be new jerseys for the Houston Texans in 2023. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.